The words crawled across the table, in a language the girl carrying the water pitcher was never meant to know. Look at her, thin as a whipped hound. I doubt she remembers what her own wolf feels like. Sabrine Thornvale did not flinch. She refilled the glass at Lord Hensley's elbow, and her hand stayed level, and her breath stayed slow, and inside her chest, something old turned over once, and went still again. 18 months. That was how long she had been practicing this. The art of being nothing. The art of a face that gave back only what a tired serving girl's face was supposed to give: fatigue and patience, and the small, dead politeness of someone who had stopped hoping for better tips. Lord Hensley was drunk. He was always drunk by the second hour. His jowls shook when he laughed, and he laughed now, because he had said something clever in the old tongue, and clever men love an audience that cannot understand them. Except she understood every word. She had understood the old tongue before she could tie her own boots. It had been sung to her in a nursery, carved into mountain stone, in a house that no longer spoke her name. And here it was, again dripping out of a fat lord's mouth, in a border tavern that smelled of spilled ale and wet dog and pine smoke, and she was pouring his water, and she was smiling the small, dead smile. "Perhaps she's a stray," said a second voice. "One of the packless ones who drift to the edge towns, hoping somebody claims them out of pity." Sabrine's eyes moved. Half an inch, a flicker no more toward the man who had spoken. And she knew the instant she did it that she had made a mistake. He sat at the head of the long table, the way other men sat on thrones. Not sprawling like Hensley. Still, contained. A stillness that cost something to hold the way a bowstring pulled to full draw is still. Dark hair pushed back from a face that had too many hard angles to be called handsome, and was somehow worse than handsome. It was a face you remembered against your will. His eyes were a pale, colorless gray, the gray of river ice an hour before it breaks. And they were on her, not the way. Hensley's men looked at her, which was a look she had learned to walk through like weather. This was different. This was measurement. The way a man counts the exits in a room he has just entered. She looked away. Too late. She knew it was too late. She has decent enough bones. Hensley went on, oblivious, warming to his own cruelty. For a servant. Perhaps we should ask what she charges for the evening. The table laughed. Sabrine set the pitcher down. Careful, unhurried. A girl who had heard nothing because she was nobody, because nobody at all had happened here. "Will there be anything else, my lords?" Her voice came out flat and worn and perfectly ordinary. The gray-eyed man tilted his head. A fraction. Like a wolf catching a sound below the range of human ears. "No," he said, in the common tongue. "You may go." So she went. She turned, and she kept her spine straight, because a bent spine draws the eye, and she walked toward the kitchen, the way she had walked 10,000 times, and she was almost through the swinging doors when he spoke again. Behind her, in the old tongue. 4 words low, meant for no one but the men at his table. She understood all of it. Sabrine's blood went to water. She did not stop. That was the discipline of 18 months, and it held her together for exactly the length of the kitchen. Past the cook bent over his pots, past the boy scrubbing grease from an iron pan, past the heat and the noise and the steam, and then she was at the back door, with her hand on the cold latch and her heart slamming so hard she thought it might give her away, by sound alone. 90 seconds. That was what she had. Maybe less. He would send someone. Men like that always sent someone. 18 months of scrubbing floors. 18 months of leers she swallowed, and slurs she pretended not to parse. 18 months of building a girl named Nobody, brick by careful brick, and she had let it all fall because her eyes had moved half an inch too far. Stupid, stupid girl. You had one rule. One. The latch lifted under her palm. The night air came through the crack, cold and clean, and smelling of freedom. A hand closed around her wrist. She spun, and her claws came before her. Thought did half-extended a snarl already in her throat and froze. He was there, behind her. In the crowded, roaring kitchen, he had crossed without a sound, without a plate rattling, without a single soul turning to look, which should not have been possible, which was not possible, except he had done it. His grip was iron. It did not hurt. That was almost worse. The old tongue, he said quietly, hasn't been taught outside the royal bloodlines in 300 years. I don't know what you mean. The words came out steady. She would give the discipline that much. Your pupils widened when Hensley named a price for you. He was not looking at her claws. I was looking at her face, reading it like a page. Your pulse jumped when I said you understood. You held your scent almost flat. A pause. Almost. There was one spike. 4 words ago. He counted my heartbeats. From across the room. He counted them. You have the wrong girl, she said. I am never wrong about this. He released her wrist. He did not step back, which leaves you 2 roads. You tell me who you are, or I walk you back to that table, and I let Hensley's men ask the questions, and I promise you, they ask them worse than I do. The door was 3 steps behind her. 3 steps and a cold night, and a forest she knew how to disappear into. She would not make 3 steps, not against him. She had known that the moment his hand landed. So she chose the other road. My name, she said, and it came out of her like something pulled up from deep water. Was Sabrian Thornvale. Something moved behind his eyes. Not surprise, exactly. Recognition arriving late, like a name you knew you should remember finally surfacing. Thornvale. He said it slowly, tasting it. The Luna line. The one Malric Duquesne swore to the whole concordance had died out. He lied. Clearly. His gaze went over her then. Not the way the men at the table had. He looked at the threadbare dress and the hands gone rough with lie, and the hollows under her eyes that no amount of sleep had filled in 18 months. The question, he said, is why the last daughter of a Luna bloodline is pouring water for drunk commanders in a town at the edge of the map. Because the woods were the other option. She met his eyes and did not blink, and I was already lying in them waiting to die the last time I trusted a powerful man. The silence after that had weight. He left you, the man said. Not a question. After he took the rest. She said nothing. That was answer enough, and they both knew it. His name was Aldous Vremont, and he was the Alpha King of the Eastern Dominion, and she learned both of these things in a small room above the tavern, where he had taken her, once the common hall grew too many ears. He sent his men away with a look. Just a look. They went. A bottle of wine sat between them on a scarred table. Neither of them touched it. She thought that was probably the most honest thing that had happened to her in a year and a half. 2 people, and a bottle, and no pretense that this was anything but what it was. Start at the front, he said. So she did. I was 17 when they betrothed me to Malric Duquesne. Her fingers found a groove in the wood and traced it. Our houses had been allied for 3 generations. His had soldiers. Mine had the blood, the Luna gift, the ability to feel the bonds inside a pack, to strengthen them, to know a traitor by the sour note in the thread before he draws his blade. Useful, Aldous said, to a man who wants to grow. He didn't want a mate. Her voice stayed even, and staying even took everything. He wanted a weapon that could smile at his enemies' banquets. For 2 years I gave it to him. I strengthened his bonds. I named 3 assassins before they moved. I made him a man nobody could reach. And then I found out what the man nobody could reach was doing with all that safety. She looked up. I wasn't defending his lands. He was hollowing out every pack that bordered them. My gift told him where the cracks were, which Alpha's second son resented his father, which Beta could be bought, which bond was already fraying. He'd send it all inward like poison. No open war, no banners, just Alphas dying in their sleep and their people waking up under his flag. Her jaw tightened until it ached. 12 packs, 3 years, thousands of wolves dead or collared, and every single one of them I found the door for. Aldous did not move. But something in the room had gone very cold, and it was not coming from her. When I understood, she went on, I told him to stop. He laughed. He said I was a child. He said this was what power actually was underneath the poems. A breath. So I told him I would expose him. Every name, every grave. And he decided a dead betrothed was quieter than a talking one. He told his own pack I'd gone feral, that the Luna gift had turned in me and made me a danger to them all. He staged an attack in his own chambers and pointed at me. She reached up and drew the collar of her dress aside, and there it was, a jagged, pale scar riding across her collarbone, old now, healed badly. His men took me into the deep wood at midnight. They were meant to end me and leave me for the roots. Aldous's eyes went to the scar and stayed there. They didn't, he said. One of them didn't. She let the collar fall. Cale Drummond. His younger sister was alive because of a warning my gift gave years before in a raid Malric never knew I'd softened. He owed a debt he'd never spoken of. He turned his back and told me to run. A small, terrible, almost laugh. So I ran, and I've been running since. New town before the old one learns your face. Never long enough for anyone to ask a question I can't answer. The Alpha King was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. It had gone flat and hard, in a way that had nothing to do with her. Malric Duquesne, he said, has been strangling everything I try to build for 11 years. She looked up. He holds the northern passes. Every road worth trading on runs through his hand. Every alliance I reach for. He's already there, whispering the alphas out of it before the ink dries. I've tried treaties. I've tried coin. I've tried a blade in the dark twice. A muscle moved in his jaw. Nothing lands. His pack would die for him because they think he can't die. And I could never understand how one man saw every knife coming. Because of me, Sabrine said softly. Because of you. His pale eyes came up and held hers. You were the reason. You were the eyes in the back of his head, which means you know where they aren't. You know the blind spots. You know the men who'd turned the evidence he thinks is buried the truth about all 12 of those packs. She saw the road he was walking her down. She had seen it 3 sentences ago. You want me to help you destroy him. I want you to help me expose him. He leaned forward, and the candle threw his shadow long across the wall. Not a knife in the dark that makes him a martyr. The truth in the open in front of every alpha who matters. Every murder, every stolen pack. You have what no living wolf has. And I have the one thing you've never had since the night they carried you into that wood. Which is, somewhere he can't reach you. She wanted to laugh at it, the size of it, the gall. And how, she said, does an alpha king put a wall between me and a man who owns the northern half of the world? By marrying you. The word landed in the middle of the table, like a dropped blade. You're joking. I don't joke about strategy. He didn't smile. Malric believes you're rotting under a tree. The instant you surface anywhere near his reach, that changes. He sends hunters. He sends worse. He burns down. Whoever sheltered you, just to make a point. But he cannot touch the Luna Queen of the Eastern Dominion without declaring open war on me. And he is not ready for that war. A pause. Not yet. Her heart was going too fast. She hated that it was. You don't know me, she said. I know you chose your conscience over your own life. I know you survived being left for dead. I know you've hidden in plain sight for 18 months without once breaking. His voice didn't soften exactly, but it slowed. I have gone to war beside men I trusted far less on far worse evidence than that. He's saying it like a ledger, like I'm a column that finally balances. And the terrible thing, the truly terrible thing, is that a column is safer than a heart. I know what men do with the second one. She stood. Her legs were not entirely steady. She crossed to the small window and looked down at the black street, and somewhere out past those roofs, Malric Duquesne was sitting warm and certain, swallowing another pack, and he thought she was bones in the dark. If I do this, she said without turning, you give me your word on one thing. Name it. Justice, not just your revenge. She faced him. The packs he emptied the survivors deserve to hear the truth spoken out loud. The alphas he murdered deserve to have their names said in a hall full of witnesses. I won't help you pull him down, just so a different king can stand where he stood. He was quiet a moment. She watched him weigh it, and did not look away while he did. Agreed, he said. Justice, not just conquest. And if I ever become a danger to your people, if sheltering me puts them at risk, you let me go. No argument. No chains. That won't happen. Promise it anyway. He crossed the room, close enough that she could feel the warmth coming off him, which after a year and a half of being cold in every town she'd fled through, was its own strange assault. I promise, he said. He held out his hand. Scarred knuckles. A signet ring cut with a crest she didn't know yet, but would come to. The hand of a man offering to make her a queen so they could burn a monster down together. She had trusted an outstretched hand once. It had left her in the dark. She took this one anyway. Then we have an agreement, she said. His grip was warm and certain. We ride for Ironhold at first light. There's a great deal of work to do. He moved toward the door. She stopped him with one more question, because it had been sitting under her ribs the whole time. Your Majesty. He paused. Why were you here tonight? An Alpha King doesn't take his supper in a border tavern this far from anything. Not by accident. For half a breath, something crossed his face. Something she couldn't name, and he didn't want her to see. I was returning from the western passes, he said. This road is faster. Then he was gone. And the answer sat in the room after him, and Sabrine, who had spent 2 years learning the exact sound a lie made in a man's throat, noted that his had one. She just couldn't yet tell what it was for. Ironhold did not welcome. Ironhold warned. It rose out of the eastern cliffs like something the mountain had grown to keep intruders honest, black towers carved straight into the rock face, windows cut narrow as arrow. Slits the whole vast weight of it, leaning over the valley below, where 10,000 chimneys smoked, and a city went about its small warm business in the shadow of all that stone. It was raised during the Blood Wars, Aldous said, riding at her carriage window. It has stood 6 sieges. The walls have never once been breached. How comforting. That was the intention. The gates opened without a word passing. Guards straightened along the walls like a field of iron reeds as their king went by, and Sabrine felt every eye slide to her carriage and stay. By nightfall, the whole fortress would know Aldous Vraimont had ridden home with a strange woman. By morning, the story would have grown a dozen extra heads. The household staff had assembled in the great courtyard, 60 wolves in dark livery, from a steward so old his hands shook to a scullery boy who couldn't have been 10. At their head stood a tall woman with iron-gray hair scraped back hard from her face, and a spine that looked to have been forged rather than born. "Your Majesty," the woman said, and bowed with the precision of a blade returning to its sheath. "Mistress Odessa." Aldous swung down, then handed Sabrine from the carriage. His grip on her waist was careful and impersonal, and gone the instant she was steady. "This is Sabrine Thornvale. She will be Luna Queen within the fortnight. See to her preparation." If Odessa was startled, nothing in her face betrayed it. Her sharp eyes went over Sabrine once, the road-worn dress, the ruined hands, the stubborn set of a jaw that had decided long ago not to break, and something that might, in a colder woman have passed for approval, moved across her mouth and vanished. "Of course, Your Majesty." She inclined her head to Sabrine. "Welcome to Ironhold, my lady. We have a great deal to do, you and I." They did. The days that followed blurred into one long trial. Sabrine learned which bow answered which rank. She memorized the names and lands and old grudges of every alpha in the Dominion until they marched through her dreams. She learned to walk in gowns that weighed more than everything she had owned as a serving girl stacked together. And she learned him in pieces, the way you learn a locked house by the rooms it lets you into. Aldous had ruled 11 years since his father died in a border skirmish that too many people believed and none could prove Malric Ducan had arranged. He had never taken a Luna, though every noble house in the realm had pushed a daughter at him. He was feared by the men across his borders, respected by the ones inside them, and understood, as far as Sabrine could tell, by almost no living soul. And there was a sister. Odessa told her that part, low-folding linens, not quite looking at her. 5 years ago, the Alpha King had sent his younger sister south as an envoy under a flag of peace to carry a treaty to a wavering pack. Her carriage was set upon on a quiet road by bandits who were never named, never found, never so much as described. She did not come home. Aldous had spent a year and a fortune trying to trace the men who did it, and had come back every time to the same silence. A silence with Malric Duquesne's shape pressed into it, and not one thread of proof to hang on him. "He doesn't speak of her," Odessa said. "Not once in 5 years, so you'll not have heard it from me." "No," Sabrine agreed. "I won't." But she carried it after that, the shape of the thing, and it changed how she saw the stillness in him. A bow held at full draw, she'd thought that first night. She had been right. She just hadn't known how long he'd been holding it, or what he was aiming at, or how tired the arm must be. It was the ledger that broke her open. 10 days in waiting in the war room for one of their evening sessions, she went looking for a map among the stacks on the long table and found half under a survey of the northern passes. A folio bound in worn leather that did not look like his. She should have left it. She knew she should have left it. Except her own name was on the first page. Thornvale Sabrine. Luna Line House, Thornvale, presumed extinct per Duquesne's testimony. Concordance of 5 years past. Note, no body ever produced. Note, no funeral rites recorded. Note, Duquesne's account, inconsistent, see attached. Her hands went cold. There were pages. Pages and pages of betrothal. She'd thought no one outside 2 houses remembered a timeline of the pacts that had fallen notes in 2 different hands. One was crisp and controlled, and she knew it now the way you know a person's step in a hall. Aldous. The other was rounder. Younger. A woman's hand, she thought, though she couldn't have said why. And it stopped. Mid-page. Mid-thought, in the middle of a line about a road south, and a treaty, and a name half-written and struck through. It stopped the way a life stops. She was still standing there with the folio open in her 2 hands when the door opened behind her. "That isn't yours to read," Aldous said. She turned. She did not apologize because the cold in her had passed straight through fear and out the other side into something harder. "You had a file on me." Her voice came out low and even and dangerous. "Before the tavern, before any of it. You knew my name, my line, my betrothal, the pacts you had, pages, Aldous. You told me that road was faster. It was faster. Don't." The word cut. "You came for me. This whole time you've stood there and let me believe a wolf king wandered into a border tavern and got lucky. You hunted me, same as he did. You found the useful girl, and you built a wall around her, because the weapon was worth housing." Her breath came ragged now, the discipline finally cracking down the middle. I keep making the same mistake. I keep trusting the hand before I look at what it's reaching for. It wasn't mine." That stopped her. "The file," he said, and his voice had gone somewhere she hadn't heard it go before, stripped quiet, the held tension finally trembling loose. "It isn't mine. The second hand. Read whose it is. You've clearly read the rest." She looked down. She hadn't turned to the front board. She turned to it now. Inside the cover, in that rounder, younger, unfinished hand, was a name. Property of Elspeth Vraymont, the sister, the envoy, the carriage on the quiet road. She didn't believe him, Aldous said, and he did not come closer, and he did not look away. Elspeth. She was the only one at that concordance who stood up when Duquesne swore your line was dead, and said the account didn't hold. No body, no rights. A story with holes in it. Everyone else wanted the treaty more than they wanted the truth, so they let it lie. A breath. She wouldn't. She started pulling the thread. That folio is how far she got. The room had gone very still. The fire spat once. She was 3 days into a journey south, he said, chasing the last piece of it, when her carriage was taken by men no one could ever name. Sabrine's throat closed. I didn't come to that tavern for a weapon, Aldous said. I've read that folio until I know it by heart. 11 years I've wanted him dead for my father. 5 for my sister. But wanting isn't proof, and a king who moves without proof is just another tyrant with a better crest. His pale eyes held her, and for once there was nothing measured in them at all. You are the peace my sister died reaching for. You are the truth she couldn't finish carrying. I didn't find a weapon in that tavern. He stopped, as if the next word cost more than he'd planned to spend. I found the end of her sentence. The folio was heavy in Sabrine's hands. Somewhere below them, the fortress breathed 60 wolves and 10,000 chimneys, and a whole valley of ordinary, warm lives. All of it sheltered under stone. A monster had never once managed to break. She looked at the unfinished line. The name half-written and struck through. A dead woman's hand stopped mid-thought on a road south, and Sabrian Thornvale, who had been left in the dark to die by a man who called her a tool, who had trusted an outstretched hand exactly once and lost everything for it, understood that she had walked into the middle of someone else's unfinished sentence, and that she was going to be the one to finish it. She closed the folio, gently, the way you close a door on someone sleeping. Then we'd better not waste his sister's work, she said. Outside, the last light was going off the mountains, and somewhere north of all that black stone, Malric Duquesne sat warm and certain, and utterly unaware that the girl he'd buried had just learned his best-kept secret, had a witness after all, and that the witness had a name. The village had no name worth remembering, and that was exactly why Malric Duquesne had chosen it to bury his secrets in. Grimshale the Maps called it. A cluster of slate roofs at the bottom of a valley, the trade roads had forgotten 3 days' hard riding northwest of Ironhold, close enough to the border that the wind carried the smell of Duquesne's lands. Sabrine had ridden with the hood of her cloak pulled low the whole way, and Aldous beside her the whole way, and 8 of his quietest wolves fanned out in the trees, where a casual eye would never find them. Because that was the thing about the northern secret, the one Elspeth Vremont had died 3 days from reaching. It had a location. A woman named Marla Crane, once a scribe in Duquesne's own household, who had copied his private ledgers for 6 years before her conscience got louder than her fear, and she ran the way Sabrine had run to a town too small to matter. She had not run far enough, but she had run, and she had taken a thing with her. A second ledger, Sabrine had said back in the war room, tracing the road on the map with one finger. Not the one he keeps, the one she copied. Every pack, every name. In his own hand, transcribed word for word, because Marla Crane was a scribe, and a scribe copies exactly. She'd looked up. It's the proof. It's the whole thing. It's what your sister was riding toward. And now they were here, at the edge of Grimshale, and something was wrong. Sabrine felt it before she could name it, the way the Luna gift had always worked in her, a wrongness in the threads before the eye caught up. The village was too quiet. No smoke from the 3rd chimney on the left, though the morning was cold enough to want a fire. A door standing half open that no careful woman in hiding would leave that way. Stop, she said. Aldous stopped. Something's already been here. Her voice had gone thin. The bonds, there's a break. A fresh one. Someone in that house was frightened badly and recently, and then nothing. The thread simply ended. She had felt that ending before in her own chest on a night in a wood 5 years and a lifetime ago. How recent? Aldous asked. Hours. He was moving before she finished the word. They found Marla Crane's cottage, the way you find any house after the wolves have come and gone by the stillness. The door hung on one hinge. Inside the small, careful life of a woman who had spent 6 years being invisible lay overturned and torn through. A cold hearth. A cot. A loose floorboard pried up and gaping and beneath it an empty space the exact size and shape of a ledger. Empty. "He got here first," Sabrine said, and her voice did something she hated. It shook, because this was the wrongness she had felt on the road. Not danger to them. Danger already done. Marla Crane was gone, dragged the marks on the floor, said not gone willingly, and the second ledger with her, and the thread in Sabrine's chest that had been Marla Crane's fear was cut clean, and she knew what a clean-cut thread meant, and she was not going to say it out loud in this cold little room. "How?" Aldous said, very quietly, which was worse than if he'd shouted. How did he know? That was the question. That was the whole question, and it would sit under everything that came after, because only a handful of living souls had known the name Marla Crane, Sabrine, Aldous, Odessa, and the small circle of allied alphas Aldous had begun carefully to draw into the plan. Someone in that circle had a second face, but they did not know that yet standing in the ruins of a scribe's courage. They only knew they had ridden 3 days for a ledger that was ash by now, or worse, and that a brave woman had paid for their arrival with whatever was left of her thread. They almost didn't make it out of Grimshale at all. The ambush came at the tree line, 6 wolves. Duquesne's left behind, precisely because he'd guessed someone might follow the scribe's trail. They came low and fast out of the frost-stiff bracken, and for one heartbeat, Sabrine was 17 again, and it was midnight, and there were claws in the dark, meant for her. And then the gift took over. Because this was the thing Malric Duquesne had never understood about the weapon he'd thrown away. He'd used her to feel other packs' weaknesses. He'd never once imagined she might feel his own men coming through the trees a full second before they broke cover, the sour, over-loyal note of wolves bonded to a master who fed them fear instead of trust. "Left," she said. "2 on the left. They'll come first." They came first. Aldous met them. His own wolves closed from the trees, and the fight was short and ugly and entirely one-sided once the surprise was spent. And through all of it, Sabrine stood in the eye of it and called it there behind you. "That one's hurt. He'll go for Aldous' flank," reading the whole murderous shape of it out loud, like a woman reading weather off the sky. When it was done, 6 of Duquesne's wolves lay still in the bracken, and not one of Aldous' had fallen, and Sabrine stood in the sudden ringing quiet with frost on her cloak, and her heart going like a war drum. Aldous looked at her across the clearing. Blood on his sleeve, not his own. Something in his face she hadn't seen there before. "You saw all of it," he said, "before it happened. I felt it." She was still shaking, but it was the good kind, now the kind that comes after, and not during. That's what the gift is. That's what he used for 3 years, and never once turned around to look at properly. A breath. "He thought I was a lantern he carried into other men's houses. He never understood I could see in his." Aldous crossed the clearing. He did not touch her. He stopped near her, near enough that she could feel the heat still coming off him from the fight, and he said low, "He should have made very sure you were dead." "Yes," Sabrine said. "But he should have." They rode home with nothing. That was the part that lived under her ribs the whole way back. Not the ambush, not the blood, but the empty floorboard. 3 days out, 3 days back, a woman's life spent, and the one piece of hard proof the thing Elspeth Vraymont had died reaching for was gone before they'd even arrived. And someone had told him where to reach. They didn't speak of it until Ironhold's gates had closed behind them, and the war room door was shut, and it was only the 2 of them and the map and the guttering fire. "It's someone in the circle," Aldous said. He said it the way a man says a thing he's been refusing to say for 3 days. It has to be. The name never left this room and 4 allies' ears. Sabrine stared at the map, at the small cluster of territories that had over the past weeks begun to lean toward Aldous. Croft, Wren, Vaughn, Aldermere. 4 alphas who had each lost something to Duquesne's slow poison 4 alphas who had each carefully been let a little way into the plan. One of them had let the plan back out. "We can't accuse blind," she said. "If we name the wrong one, we lose all 4, and the coalition dies before the concordance even opens. And if we do nothing, he keeps a knife in the middle of us the whole way to the hall. Then we don't do nothing." She looked up. "And we don't accuse. We fish." She should have been more careful. That was the truth she would carry afterward, the splinter she couldn't work out. She had spent 18 months trusting no one, and it had kept her alive. And then Ironhold had given her walls and a fire, and a man who stood near her without ever taking, and something in her had loosened. Just enough. Just enough to make the mistake. His name was Silas Wren. How was the warmest of the 4. That was what she'd noticed first, and it should have been what warned her, because a monster's best man wears the kindest face. She of all people knew that she'd been engaged to the kindest face in the Northern Territories. But Wren laughed easily and grieved openly. He'd lost a brother's whole pack to Duquesne's absorptions, and he spoke of it with his eyes wet, and Sabrine, who had learned to read a lie in a man's throat, heard no lie in his. Which only proves she would think later that grief is the easiest thing in the world to counterfeit. Because you can't fake the shape of it, but you can absolutely fake having felt it. So when Wren came to her 3 days before they were to ride for the concordance, and said quietly that he thought he knew where Marla Crane had been taken, that he had a man near Duquesne's holdings who'd heard a whisper that if they moved fast, there might still be time to reach the scribe before the worst. Sabrine leaned toward him, and she told him the plan. Not all of it, but enough. That they suspected a copied ledger. That they meant to send riders quietly north on the old drover's track to reach Crane before the concordance opened, so they could bring living testimony into the hall instead of hearsay. She told him the road, the old drover's track. Wren's eyes filled. He clasped her hand in both of his. He said she was braver than the whole council of alphas put together, and he rode out that night ostensibly to ready his own house for the journey to the concordance. The riders Aldous sent north on the old drover's track 2 mornings later rode straight into Duquesne's men. They came back, most of them, and 2 wounded, and a message burned into all of them. Malric Duquesne had known the road, the hour, the number. He had known everything, and the fragile chance that still existed of reaching Marla Crane alive was gone. Word came within the week, carried by one of Aldous' own scouts, flat and final. Marla Crane was dead. The copied ledger, the real one, the one in Duquesne's own transcribed hand, had been burned in front of witnesses in Duquesne's hall as a lesson. He had made a small ceremony of it. The proof was ash. Sabrine stood in the war room when the scout finished, and she did not move, and she did not speak, and inside her chest, something that had been holding on very hard for a very long time began quietly to let go. "I did this," she said. "Sabrine. I told him the road." Her voice was terrible in its evenness. "Wren. It was Wren, it was always Wren, and I told him. I sat there, and I read no lie in his face, and I handed him the road, and now she's dead, and the ledger's ash, and your sister." Her voice cracked straight down the middle. Your sister died 3 days from a thing I just burned. I'm no better than the weapon Duquesne made. Point me at the truth, and watch me destroy it. She was already moving for the door, because that was what she did. That was the one thing she was truly good at after 18 months of practice, leaving, before the room could decide what to do with her. Aldous caught her at the door. Not her wrist this time. Her shoulders. He turned her, and he made her look at him, and his face was not angry, which somehow undid her more than anger would have. Stop, he said. Look at me. Stop. Let me go. You promised. You said if I became a danger. You didn't become a danger. His grip tightened. You became proof. She stared at him. Sabrine, think. Think the way he trained you to think, and then think one step past it, the way he never could. His pale eyes held her hard and steady. How did Duquesne know the road? Because I told Wren. You told Wren. Only Wren. Not Croft, not Vaughn, not Aldermere. Wren and Wren alone that one specific road on that one specific night. He said it slowly, laying it down like a card. You've spent 3 days grieving a mistake. I've spent 3 days thinking about what the mistake just told us. And she felt it land. The whole cold shape of it. He didn't just get lucky in Grimshale, she said slowly. He didn't have a spy in general. He had Wren, specifically, provably. Because the only living soul who knew about the drover's track was the man you told. The grief was still there. It didn't leave Marla. Crane was still dead, the ledger was still ash, and those were real permanent things she would carry. But underneath the grief, something else was rising now, something with a spine. I didn't burn the proof, she said very slowly, as it came together. I found the traitor. Thinks he's clever. He thinks he's gotten away clean, that he's ash-covered and safe, and riding to the Concordance to sit at your council table with the rest. Her jaw set. He doesn't know that the road he sold us was a road only he could have sold. No, Aldous said. He doesn't. And for the first time since Grimshale, something that was almost a smile touched the corner of Sabrine's mouth. Cold. Precise. The smile of a woman who had just been handed a knife and recognized the make of it. Then let's not tell him, she said. Let's feed him. The trap was simple, which was why it worked. Sabrine let it be known carefully in the way a thing is let known, when you want exactly one man to hear it, that not all had been lost at Grimshale after all. That Marla Crane, being a scribe, had been a cautious woman. That she had made not one copy of Duquesne's ledger, but 2. And that the second copy, the true second copy, was held for safekeeping in a place only the Alpha King and his Luna Queen knew, and that they meant to carry it themselves personally to the Concordance. She said it in a small council. 4 Alphas, Croft, Vaughn, Aldermere, and Wren. She watched his face when she said it. She had learned at last not to trust his tears. So she watched something else, the thing a man can't school when he thinks he's already won, and the game is suddenly still moving. The flicker behind the eyes. The half-beat of stillness. The recalculation. There. She saw it. There it was. A second copy, Wren said warmly. Thank the old gods. Where is it held for safety? The council should know in case something happens to us on the road. Sabrine smiled at him. Gently, like a friend. No, I don't think the council should know. I think the fewer souls who know a road, the safer the traveler. A pause, soft as a blade, going in. Wouldn't you agree, Alpha Wren? After what happened to the last riders we sent north. The room did not understand what had just passed. 3 of the 4 alphas heard only prudence. Ren heard the door closing. I was gone before dawn, riding north to warn Duquesne about a ledger that did not exist, to arrange an ambush on a road no one would travel to spring a trap with no jaws in it. And Aldous' fastest scouts rode behind him the whole way unseen and watched him cross into Duquesne's lands, and watched him meet in a wayside inn near the border with 2 of Duquesne's commanders. They brought that back. Names, places. A witness who'd served the wine at that very table. Silas Wren had not just failed to spring a real trap. He had walked in front of watching eyes straight into proof of exactly what he was. The grief was real, Sabrine said quiet when the scouts had gone. She was looking into the fire. That's the part I can't. His brother's pack really was taken. He really did lose them. And he turned around and served the man who did it, because Duquesne offered him back a scrap of what he'd stolen, and Wren decided a scrap was worth his soul. A long breath. That's the thing about being broken, Aldous. It doesn't make you good. It just makes you a door, and it's your own choice which way you let it swing. Aldous was quiet beside her a moment. You swung yours the other way, he said. I had help. She didn't look at him. You stopped me at that door. I was going to run. I always run. It's the one thing I'm truly excellent at. Crooked, almost smile. You caught me by the shoulders and made me look at the thing instead of leaving it. Nobody's ever done that. Every other hand that reached for me was reaching to use me or throw me away. Yours reached to turn me around. The fire cracked between them. He was near her again the way he always managed to be near her. And this time, she noticed it. She couldn't stop her to notice it. He let his hand rest a moment over hers on the table, and did not pull it back. Neither of them said anything about that. There wasn't time, because the coalition still had to build together. And there were 12 visiting alphas to face before the concordance, and a monster's poison ran through half the northern houses, and there was still no proof at all, now that the ledger was ash nothing but the word of a serving girl who'd once worn Duquesne's ring. Which is to say, everything still rested on her. On whether a hall full of powerful, frightened, skeptical wolves would believe a woman who had come from nowhere. They came to Ironhold to be convinced. 12 of them alphas whose lands Duquesne had bruised but not yet broken wolves, who had reason to want him gone, and every reason in the world to doubt that a girl in a borrowed crown was the one to do it. Aldous had gathered them for a single formal dinner with a single purpose. They needed to believe the Luna Queen was real. If they didn't, the coalition he'd spent 3 years building would come apart in one evening. No pressure, Sabrine murmured, watching the great hall fill from the top of the stair. You outrank most of them, Aldous said. That's not the same as them believing I've earned it. She wore deep green that night, and the silver circlet that had been Aldous' mother's, and when she came down the great staircase, the conversations below stuttered and died. She knew what they saw. An unknown woman in a queen's crown. A stranger who'd surfaced from nowhere to claim the most powerful Luna seat on the continent. She also knew what she needed them to see. And she had decided somewhere on the ride back from Grimshale, with nothing in her hands, that she would not win them with power. She'd been made by a man who ruled with power. She knew exactly what it built. She would try the other thing. She went to the hardest man in the room first. A weathered alpha named Thaddeus Croft, scarred across one cheek, arms folded, watching her come with open suspicion. Alpha Croft. She stopped before him. Your house held the Greymore Valley for 6 generations before Duquesne's forces pushed you out of it. Your youngest daughter was promised to a wolf of the Holloway pack. She paused. Before Bertrand Holloway was murdered. Croft went very still. You know the Holloways, he said. I know Bertrand Holloway was poisoned with the ceremonial wine before a formal challenge his own honor demanded he accept. I know he was dead before the first blow landed, and that Duquesne called it a weak heart. I know his daughter Wren was given to one of Duquesne's commanders as payment for loyalty, and I don't know if she's still alive, and I have not stopped thinking about her since the day I fled. Her voice did not rise. It didn't have to. You've been waiting 6 years for someone to say these things out loud in a room like this. So have I. The hall had gone silent around them. How do you know all this? Another alpha demanded sharp. Sabrine turned to face the room. The circlet caught the light. Because I was there. She let it land. My name before I was Luna Queen was Sabrine Thornvale. For 2 years I was betrothed to Malric Duquesne, and I used the Luna gift to make him untouchable, and I did not understand what I was making until it was too late to unmake it. A breath. I know his crimes because I was standing beside him when he committed them. I know the names of the dead. I know the men who buried them. And I have come here not to ask you to follow me, but to tell you the truth you were never allowed to hear, and let you decide for yourselves what it's worth. The silence stretched. It stretched long enough that she felt the old fear reach for her. They don't believe you. They'll never believe you. You're nobody. He made sure you'd always be nobody. Then Thaddeus Croft raised his cup. To the Luna Queen, he said rough, and to the day we say Bertrand Holloway's name in a hall Duquesne can't walk out of. One by one, the others followed. Not all with the same warmth, but all. And across the room, over the heads of 12 convinced alphas, Sabrine found Aldous watching her. And there was something new in his face, something past respect, something he wasn't fast enough this time to hide. The summons came by Raven on a gray morning 9 days later. Odessa carried it in and did not need to say what it was, because Sabrine had been waiting for it, the way you wait for a storm you've watched build on the horizon for weeks. The Concordance, the gathering of every major alpha in the realm, held once in 5 years, hosted this cycle by the Northern Coalition, which meant hosted in every way that mattered on ground, that answered to Malric Duquesne, which meant he would be there. We don't have to go, Aldous said in the war room, not looking up from the map. I can send representatives, claim illness, buy more time. No. She set the Raven's scroll on the table. If we hide, he wins the room before we've spoken a word. Are you afraid of him? She didn't lie. She'd stopped lying to this man somewhere on a cold road 3 days out from Grimshale. Terrified, she said. He left me in the dark to die Aldous. Some nights I still wake up running from a smell. Pine smoke and cold iron. A breath. But every single day he believes I'm bones under a tree is a day he sleeps easy. I want him to look up across a full hall and see me wearing your mother's crown. I want him to understand that everything he buried is about to stand up and say his name. Aldous studied her a long moment. Then he crossed the room, and he stood close, and his hand came up, and this time he did touch her face, the backs of 2 fingers along her jaw, brief like a man checking that a thing was real. When he sees you, he said low, he'll know everything has changed. He'll be at his most dangerous the instant he's most afraid. Don't let him see your fear. Don't let him see anything but the queen you've made yourself into. And what have I made myself into? Something moved in his face. Raw, unguarded. The tension in him for one breath laid down. Someone I didn't plan for, he said quietly. Someone who's become necessary to me in a way I don't have language for yet. Then he stepped back, and the moment closed, and the war returned to the room. We ride in 4 days, he said. Stay close to me at all times. Don't engage him without me present. And if anything at all feels wrong, we leave that hour. Agreed. 4 days. She had 4 days before she walked into a hall built on her enemy's ground and dared him to look at the woman he'd tried to erase. She spent the last of them at the high window, watching the light go off the mountains, and she was not thinking about her fear, though it was there. She was thinking about a scribe named Marla Crane, who had run and not run far enough. About a dead woman's handwriting stopped mid-sentence on a road south. About Wren Holloway 16 and given away like a coin alive or not alive, waiting or past waiting. She had no ledger now, no hard proof, nothing but her own voice and her own memory, and a gift a monster had thrown away, without ever understanding what it could do when it was pointed at last at him. It would have to be enough. She would make it enough. Because somewhere north of all that black stone, Malric Duquesne was sitting warm and certain, cultivating alphas, counting his safety, and he did not yet know that the girl he'd buried was 4 days from walking into his own borrowed hall, and that this time she wasn't running toward the dark. She was walking straight into the light, and she was going to make him stand in it with her. Thorngate Fortress rose out of the mountain mist, like a thing that had been waiting there since before there were wolves to fear it. It sat in the high pass between territories on neutral stone under the ancient laws of concordance banners from 24 lands snapping in a wind that smelled of snow off peaks no one owned. Wolves from every corner of the rim had come. The whole map folded into one hall. Sabrine's hands wanted to shake as the carriage climbed the last road to the gates. She folded them into the deep green of her gown and would not let them. "Breathe," Aldous said beside her. "You outrank half the wolves behind those walls. Remember it. And the other half, fear me too much to come near you." They stepped down into a courtyard full of watching eyes. Elves and their people clustered in careful knots, old alliances and older grudges, written in the spaces they kept between one another. And the whispers started before she'd taken 3 steps. "Is that the new Luna Queen? She came from nowhere. No one can name her line. I heard she was before he found her." Sabrine kept her spine straight and her face still, and let the silver circlet catch the light. Let them whisper. Let them wonder. Because a woman they couldn't place was a woman they couldn't dismiss, and she had learned at last to make her mystery into armor. The great hall of Thorngate was a cathedral of cold stone and firelight, the long tables set in a horseshoe around an open speaking floor. Aldous guided her to their place, high table, eastern side seats of honor, and she was reaching for the water when she felt it. A darkness pressing against her senses. A scent she had spent 18 months trying to scrub out of her dreams, and never once managed. Pine smoke, cold iron, and underneath it, faint and unmistakable, the metal tang of a man who enjoyed cruelty, the way other men enjoyed wine. Malric Duquesne had entered the hall. He looked exactly as she remembered, which was its own small violence, because monsters should wear their faces, and his never had. Golden hair swept back from features built to be trusted. Warm brown eyes that folded into kind lines when he smiled. The kind of beauty that made a room lean toward him before he'd said a word. She knew what lived behind it. She'd been engaged to what lived behind it. I was working the crowd, gathering greetings, radiating that easy warmth, and he hadn't seen her yet. His attention was on a cluster of Northern Alpha's targets he was cultivating. Then someone leaned to his ear and murmured, and his gaze came up and swept the hall and found her, and stopped. For 3 full heartbeats, nothing in the world existed but the space between them. She watched the color drain out of his face. She watched the confident smile freeze on it and crack. She watched 18 months of certainty crumble to ash behind his eyes as he understood she was alive. She was crowned. She was sitting at the right hand of the one man in the realm, strong enough to shelter her. She raised her cup. An inch, a toast, a taunt. I'm still here. Duquesne's face cycled through shock and disbelief and something that looked for one unguarded instant, almost like fear. And then the mask slammed back down. He smiled. That same warm, trusted smile. He inclined his head to her courteous, as though she were any noblewoman he was pleased to see. Then he turned back to his conversation as if nothing at all had happened. But she'd seen it. The thing under the mask. The fear. Good. The first 2 days of the concordance passed in formal negotiation, and careful circling treaties argued and disputes weighed. And through all of it, Sabrine felt Duquesne's attention on her like a blade laid flat against her throat. He kept his distance. He was planning something. She could feel it in the threads the way she'd once felt assassins coming, a wrongness gathering, waiting for its hour. On the 3rd night, she found out what. She had slipped out to a balcony for air, the press of bodies and politics gone suddenly unbearable, and the mountain wind was clean and cold and carried snow from far peaks. Footsteps behind her. She turned expecting Aldous. Malric Duquesne stood in the doorway. "Hello, Sabrine. Honey and venom in equal measure. You look remarkably well, for a dead woman. Funny." She did not step back. "You look remarkably calm, for a murderer." Murder. He came onto the balcony, let the door fall shut behind him. "I've no idea what you mean. You vanished before our wedding. We searched for months. I grieved. You had your wolves drag me into the deep wood and leave me for dead. A misunderstanding. Overzealous men reading a threat where there was none." He moved closer, and the old charm came off him like heat off a stone. "I would never have harmed you. I loved you. You loved what I could do for you." Her voice stayed level. "There's a difference. I've had 18 months to learn exactly how wide it is." The mask flickered, just at the edges. "Whatever grievance you think you carry," he said softer now, "this is not the place to air it. You've somehow got Vraimont to marry you. Congratulations on the climb. Truly, it's impressive work for a serving girl. But if you stand up in that hall and make accusations, you'll only shame yourself. You have no proof. You burned it yourself, didn't you? Or rather, I did." He smiled. "It's your word against mine. A spotless alpha against a nobody who crawled out of obscurity into a convenient bed. Whom do you imagine they'll believe?" "The truth," Sabrine said, "when they finally hear it." He laughed low and gentle, and leaned in close and dropped his voice to the register a man uses for the things he means most. "Let me be very clear with you then. Your mother, your brother, still in that little village near the southern border, aren't they? Still farming, still unguarded." His warm brown eyes had gone flat as coins. "If you say one word against me in that hall, they'll be dead before you reach home. A raid. Tragic. Random. Nothing anyone could ever hang on me." A pause. "Do you understand me, Sabrine?" Ice went through her root to crown, because that was the one thing. That was the only lever left in the world that could still move her. And he'd found it the way he found every lever, because finding levers was the whole of what he was. "You're threatening my family," she said. "I'm explaining consequences. You've lived longer than you should have. Don't press the luck." He stepped back, and the kind mask slid smoothly home. "Enjoy the rest of the Concordance, Luna Queen. And remember, some things are better left buried, some people too." He walked away and left her alone with the wind and the weight of it. And for one long moment, the old terror had her whole. Her mother's face, her brother barely grown. The only two threads left in the world that were purely simply hers. She had to warn Aldous. She had to... "How much did you hear?" She spun. Aldous stood in the shadow at the balcony's far end. His face was carved from something colder than stone. "All of it," he said quietly. "I followed the moment I saw him move toward you. My family will be under my banner by dawn. I'm sending riders tonight, the fastest I have, south to the border. They'll have your mother and brother inside Ironhold's walls before Duquesne can so much as write the order." He crossed to her, and his hands closed over her shoulders, and his eyes held hers. "He will not touch them. I swear it on my blood and my throne. Do you trust me?" Yes. And the astonishing thing was that it was true. Wholly without the old reservation. Somewhere on the road from a border tavern, she had started trusting this man, and she had not even felt it happen. "Then trust this, too." His thumb brushed her cheek and came away wet, and she hadn't known she was crying. "He thinks he's won because he threatened what you love. He doesn't understand that he just handed us the hall." "What do you mean?" "He threatened the Luna Queen's family. In front of a witness." Something lit in Aldous' eyes, cold and bright and terrible. "Under Concordance law, that isn't only a crime against you, Sabrine. It's grounds full and ancient grounds for me to demand the right of grievance. A formal hearing. On any and every accusation we choose to bring." His grip tightened. "He just gave us the standing to make him stand and answer for all of it. Tomorrow we use it." She didn't sleep. She paced her chamber while Aldous' riders thundered south into the dark, and she turned the whole thing over and over, because they had the standing. Now yes, they had the right of grievance, but standing was not proof, and the ledger was ash. And what did she have to put in front of a hall of skeptics but her own voice against a spotless man's? A word against a word. Except she had been thinking about it wrong. She had been mourning the ledger like it was the only door, when the ledger had never been the truth. It had only been the record of the truth. Paper, and paper burns. But the truth had happened to living wolves. It had happened inside their bonds, in the pack threads that a Luna could feel and read, and if the bond ran deep enough, could wake. Memory lived in those threads. Grief lived there. The shape of a murder lived there in the wolves who had loved the murdered and been forced to call it a weak heart. She had spent 3 years using that gift to find the cracks in other men's houses. She had never once thought to use it to make the silenced speak. There was a knock at her door. Soft, careful. She opened it, and Aldous stood there, still-dressed shadows under his eyes. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you." He came in without asking. "I couldn't stop thinking about what he said to you. That you're nobody." He's not wrong. Not so long ago I was pouring water in a tavern. Not so long ago I was a king with no reason left underneath the crown. He moved closer. I had power. Allies. Strategy. And somewhere in 11 years I'd forgotten why any of it was supposed to matter. Revenge had become the whole point, instead of the road to something. And then you. He stopped in front of her. Every time you said justice instead of vengeance. Every time you spoke a dead wolf's name out loud. You reminded me what the crown was for. Aldous, I didn't marry you because you were useful. His voice had gone rough, all the control stripped out of it. I told myself I did. I believed it for about a week. But the truth is, I married you because when I found you in that tavern, something in me recognized something in you. Two wolves the same enemy tried to break. Two wolves who refused to stay that way. His eyes held hers. When he threatened your family tonight, I felt something I haven't felt since they carried my sister's story home to me, with no ending on it. Not a strategist's calculation. Rage, pure and total. Because it hurt you. That isn't strategy at all. Her breath had gone shallow. What are you saying? I'm saying somewhere between survival and strategy, this became real. He raised his hand, and this time he did not catch himself. He cupped her face. I've built my whole life on control. You dismantled it without even trying. She reached up and covered his hand with hers. I was left in the dark to die, she said, by a man I thought I loved. I swore I'd never hand anyone that kind of power over me again. She turned her face into his palm. And then you caught me at a door I was running out of and turned me around instead of using the moment to your advantage. Nobody had ever done that. I don't know how to face tomorrow without you. And that terrifies me more than Duquesne does. Then don't face it without me. He rested his forehead against hers. Whatever tomorrow costs, we pay it together. She kissed him. Not tentative, not asking. A kiss with 18 months of cold roads in it, and every shared map, and every guarded moment, he had finally let fall. He pulled her in, and for a moment, the whole gathering storm of the morning fell away. When they broke apart, his eyes were brighter than she'd ever seen them. There's a word for this, he said. I think I finally know it. Then say it. Not yet. He pressed his lips to her forehead. After. When it's finished. When we're free. I want to say it to a free woman, not a frightened one. Promise. I promise. He held her until the sky began to gray. And then, together, they got ready to end it. The final day of the concordance dawned cold and clear. 24 alphas assembled in the great hall for the closing ceremonies. Duquesne sat in a place of honor, warm and easy, certain he had won certain. Sabrine would sit silent to keep her family breathing. He had made one mistake. He had made it 18 months ago in a wood at midnight, and he was about to learn he'd been making it ever since. He had never made sure she was dead. Aldous rose as the ceremonies closed. Before we depart, he said, and his voice carried to the last stone, I invoke the right of grievance. The hall went silent as a held breath. The right of grievance was old law rarely spoken because the cost of it fell heavy on accuser and accused alike. Any alpha could demand that accusations be heard before the full concordance. Few ever dared. On what grounds? The presiding elder asked. Attempted murder, the systematic destruction of sovereign pacts through poison and fraud, and the threatening of my Luna Queen's blood kin spoken to her face upon a balcony of this very fortress 2 nights past, heard by my own ears. Aldous' voice rang like struck iron. I accuse Alpha Malric Duquesne of crimes against the peace of the realm. The hall erupted. Duquesne was on his feet, all theatrical outrage. This is absurd. Vraiment has been my enemy for a decade. He'll say anything to ruin me. Then let the truth answer for itself. Aldous turned. My Luna Queen was once betrothed to Malric Duquesne. She saw his crimes from the inside. She will speak." Every eye in the hall turned to Sabrine. She rose. The silver circlet caught the light, and the whispering died, and she stood in the center of all those watching wolves, the ones who doubted her, the ones who feared her, the ones who had waited 6 years for someone to say the names. And she was not in that moment afraid. "I was Sabrine Thornvale of the Luna Line," she began, and her voice was steady, and it carried. "For 2 years I was betrothed to Malric Duquesne. I used the gift of my blood to strengthen his pack and make him untouchable, and I did not understand what I was building until 12. Sovereign packs had fallen to it through assassination, through poison, through fraud, dressed up as fortune. Lies Duquesne called out smooth. She's unwell. I ended our betrothal when the madness showed itself. It grieves me to see it's only worsened." "Bertrand Holloway," Sabrine said, and did not so much as glance at him. "Alpha of the Greymoor territory. Poisoned with the ceremonial wine before a formal challenge, dead before the first blow, and called a weak heart. His daughter Wren, 16 years old, given to a commander as payment for loyalty." A murmur went through the hall. Thaddeus Croft leaned forward, his scarred face gone hard. "I have the names," Sabrine went on. "I have the dates. I have the methods used to dress each murder up as a legitimate death." She turned at last to face Duquesne directly. "But you'll tell them I imagined it. A servant's fevered fancy. And you burned the only record I know I felt the woman who kept it die." Her voice did not break. She would not let it break in front of him. "So I won't give you paper today, Malric. Paper burns. You taught me that." She stepped down onto the open speaking floor. "I'll give them something you can't put to the torch." She had asked that morning for the survivors. Aldous had brought them quietly through the side halls, wolves scattered through the gathered packs who had lost someone to Duquesne's slow poison and never been allowed to say so. A beta who had served Bertrand Holloway. A woman whose mate had died in an accident 2 weeks after signing away his lands. Small people. Overlooked people. The ones a monster never counts because he cannot imagine they matter. Sabrine went to the first of them, an old beta, with Holloway's grief still living in his eyes, and she took his hand. "You were there," she said gently, "the night your alpha fell. You've carried it for 6 years and been forced to call it a weak heart. I'm going to help you remember it true. May I?" The old wolf's eyes filled. He nodded. And Sabrine closed her eyes and reached into the thread between them, the pack bond frayed and grief-scarred, and never once healed, and she woke it. She did not put words in him. That was the thing she would say after to anyone who tried to call it her invention. She put nothing in. She only opened the door that Duquesne's fear had nailed shut and let the man's own memory come through it. And the beta began to speak in a voice cracking with 6 years of forced silence, of a cup of wine and a poison. He'd been made to swear was a failing heart of a body, carried out a side door of a daughter, dragged screaming into the dark. One by one she went down the line. One by one she woke them. And one by one the overlooked people of the realm, stood up in the great hall of Thorngate and spoke the truth. Their bonds had held for them all these years, and there was no paper to burn, and no way on earth to call a dozen living memories a mad woman's fancy. The hall was rising now, a tide of it alphas, on their feet, voices breaking loose. "My brother's pack was absorbed 3 years past," one shouted. "They told us he died in a border skirmish." "My father trusted you with his negotiations," another cried. "He was dead in a fortnight." Duquesne backed away from the rising water of it, and his mask was slipping, now sliding off in pieces. This is conspiracy. Vremont's coached them. He's bought their grief. Then explain the last witness, Aldous said. The great doors of the hall swung open, and a haggard man in chains was led onto the floor, gaunt, hollow-eyed, but unmistakable to the one man who went white at the sight of him. Kyle Drummond, the wolf who had carried out Malric Duquesne's darkest orders for a decade. The wolf who at midnight in a deep wood 5 years past had been commanded to end a girl's life and had turned his back and told her to run instead. "It's true," Drummond said, and his voice was empty and enormous in the silent hall. "All of it. I was there for the Holloway poisoning. I disposed of the dead from 6 other packs. I delivered the Holloway girl to a commander's door on his direct order." He lifted his eyes to the man he'd served. "I'm done carrying his secrets. They're heavier than these chains." Duquesne stared at him like a man watching the ground open. "You realized," Aldous said, cold and even, "that loyalty to him ended in a grave the moment you stopped being useful. So you chose to talk. We only had to promise you'd be safe enough to do it." The presiding elder rose, grave as stone. "Malric Duquesne, you stand accused of crimes against the peace of the realm. How do you answer?" Silence. Then Duquesne moved. He shifted faster than thought, his wolf exploding out of the man, huge and golden and lethal, launching not at Aldous, not at the guards, but at her, at Sabrine, at the girl he'd buried 18 months of thwarted murder in his eyes. The hall scattered. Aldous met him in the air. The two wolves collided with a sound like a landslide and went down together in a churning tangle of fur and fury, crashing across the stone. Duquesne fought the way, only the desperate fight, without limit, without care, everything spent at once. A claw raked Aldous's shoulder, and blood sheeted down his foreleg, and Sabrine's heart stopped in her chest. But desperation is not the same as strength, and Aldous Vremont had spent 11 years, and a father and a sister, waiting for exactly this. He drove Duquesne back across the floor, past the overturned tables, past the witnesses, pressed to the walls. And then he found his opening, and he closed his jaws hard at the golden wolf's throat, and held, and the whole hall went utterly still. Duquesne shifted back to a man beneath him, a thin line of blood at his neck where the teeth pressed. "Yield," Aldous growled, barely words at all. For one heartbeat, defiance still burned in Malric Duquesne's eyes. Then it went out. "I yield," he whispered. Aldous released him and shifted back, and the guards were on Duquesne before he could rise, hauling him up in chains of his own now. The presiding elder's voice rang out over the wreck of the hall. "Malric Duquesne is found guilty by combat and by testimony. His lands are forfeit. His crimes pass to the full council for judgment. Take him." As they dragged him toward the doors, his eyes found Sabrine one last time, and his ruined voice reached her across the whole silent hall. "You should have stayed dead." Sabrine stepped forward. She met his gaze, and for the first time in 18 months, there was no fear left in her, anywhere at all. "No," she said. "You should have made certain of it." The aftermath was chaos, statements, taken alliances, remade survivors found and gathered, and for the first time in years, believed. It was near midnight before Sabrine and Aldous stood alone on the same balcony where Duquesne had made his threat. Only now the wind had gone gentle and had carried nothing but snow and the clean, cold smell of a thing finished. "Your family is safe," Aldous said. "My riders reached them at dawn. Your mother and your brother are inside Ironhold's walls tonight. No one will touch them again." Sabrine closed her eyes, and the last knot in her chest, the one that had been tied since a fat lord spoke cruelty in an old tongue, in a border tavern, finally came loose. "Thank you," she breathed. "You don't have to thank me. They're my family now, too." He turned to her. Bandages wrapped his shoulder where Duquesne's claws had opened it. Exhaustion sat heavy on him. But his eyes, when they found hers, were warm in a way she had never once seen in all these weeks. "You promised me something. After. A word you'd say when we were free." "I did." He moved closer, no distance held back in him now. His hand came to her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheek. "We're free now. Yes. I love you, Sabrine. I didn't plan it. I couldn't tell you the hour it happened. Somewhere between a tavern and this balcony, between a woman I meant to use and a queen I'd follow into any hall on the continent." A rough breath. "It is the most irrational thing I have ever done. And I have never in my life been more certain of anything." Tears spilled down her face, and she let them. "You were supposed to be cold," she said, half laughing through it. "Cold and strategic. It was the whole plan. You ruined the plan. Completely." And he smiled, a real one, unguarded, a smile she suspected almost no one living had ever seen. "I regret nothing. I love you too." She said it into the small space between them. "I thought I was broken, past mending. I thought I'd never hand my heart to a living soul again. But you saw who I could be before I could see it myself. You reached for me to turn me around when every other hand reached to take." She pressed her forehead to his. "You made me believe I was worth protecting." "You were always worth protecting," he said. "You only needed to be there when someone finally proved it." He kissed her on the balcony under the mountain snow, and 18 months of dark roads went quiet at last. 6 months later, morning light came through the tall windows of Ironhold's great hall and fell across a room that had forgotten how to be a war room. Where the strategy tables had stood, there were small desks now. Reading primers. The low, steady hum of women learning. 23 of them moved through the hall, survivors of Duquesne's long cruelty wolves, who had been given away as prizes or left with nothing when their packs were swallowed. They were learning to read, to manage coin, to defend themselves so that no one would ever again decide their worth for them. Sabrine called it the Ironhold Sanctuary. Aldous called it her revolution, and he was not wrong. 3 more petitions this week, Odessa said, handing over the ledger. A good ledger. This one full of names being written in instead of struck out. Words traveling the northern lands. Women are walking a fortnight to reach us. We'll need the East Wing. He's already approved the East Wing, Sabrine said. Of course he has. Among the women learning to trust the world again was a girl of 16 with wary eyes and a holloway jaw. Wren found alive in the wreck of Duquesne's fallen house, taken back from the commander who'd been given her like a coin. She was learning to speak above a whisper again. Some days now, she even smiled. Sabrine counted each of those days like treasure. Malric Duquesne had been executed a month past. His crimes ran so deep that even the Alphas who had once feared him voted in the end for death. His lands were being returned valley by valley to the bloodlines he'd stolen them from more than 40 families, given back their homes and their names. Justice, not vengeance. Exactly as she'd made Aldous promise in a room above a tavern when they were still strangers with a common enemy. She found him in what had been the war room. No longer planning battles now, only the resettlement of freed lands. "You're staring," he said without looking up. "I'm admiring my husband. Is it not allowed?" He set down his pen and turned to her, and she crossed the room and settled into his lap despite his half-hearted mutter about important documents, and his arms came around her the way they always did now, without hesitation, without a moment held back. "Do you remember," she said, "the first time you saw me? A serving girl who understood words she had no business knowing." His lips brushed her temple. "I thought you were a spy. And now—" He pulled back just enough to find her eyes. "Now I think I went looking for a weapon against my enemy," he said, "and found the other half of my own soul instead." Outside the window, Ironhold's grounds ran green toward the horizon. Gardens where once there had been only stone families, walking where once there had been only soldiers. Life growing up out of the ruin of what they'd torn down together. Sabrine rested her head against his chest and listened to his heart. She had been mocked, abandoned, erased, left in the dark to die by a man who called her a tool and never once looked closely enough to see the whole of what she was. She had survived on stubbornness and a small, desperate hope that someday, somehow, she would matter again. And now she was Luna, Queen of the Eastern Dominion, founder of a sanctuary for the broken, wife to a man who had chosen her when he could have used her. And somewhere out in the mountains, in the ruin of a tyrant's empire, the wolves he had silenced were speaking their own names again out loud in halls he could no longer walk into. All because an Alpha King had underestimated a serving girl, and she had understood every word. Thank you for staying to the very end of this one. If something in Sabrine's story reached you, the fight for justice over vengeance, the quiet power of finally being seen, the strength it takes to rise out of the ashes of what was taken from you, I hope you'll pass it along to someone who might need to hear it today. Tell us your favorite moment in the comments and where in the world you're listening from. And if you'd like to be here for the next story, where love finds its way through the impossible, once again, you're always welcome to come back and listen a while. Thank you for listening, and for believing that even in the darkest woods, a person can find their way back into the light.